This is a Nice Guys Patreon exclusive.
Welcome to another Ice Guys team season preview video as 32 teams in 32 days rolls along. Ian Cameron, Alex B. Smith. We are talking Pittsburgh Penguins in this preview video. And joining us to talk Pittsburgh Penguins, I guess you probably could have figured would be the one we would turn to for the Pittsburgh Penguins from Pittsburgh, Matt Geitka. You've seen him obviously on the show a couple of times with us last year. What do you think, Matt, for first of all, how are things going? How's the summer been?
Yeah, things are great. It's hot here in the eastern U.S., so it feels like it's still the summer, but I think I'm ready to get back into the cold because it's a third consecutive long off season for the Penguins. When you're in the playoffs year after year, it feels too short. I was never ready for training camp until the last 3 years, but especially now, it's like let's get after it. I know the team's not going to be great, probably. But at the same time, there's still like we were saying before the show, before we got started. There's still plenty of points of interest for the Penguins, even if they might finish toward the bottom of the standings.
Yeah, no doubt, and that's going to be the challenge for Pittsburgh is improving from last year. And yes, as you mentioned, great segue into just recapping what the Penguins did last year. Rarefied air for them outside looking in when it came to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Last year, of course, this team finished with 80 points on the 80 points on the season. Only the Philadelphia Flyers finished below them in the Metropolitan Division, and only them, along with Buffalo and Boston, over in the Atlantic Division, finished with fewer points than the Pittsburgh Penguins last year. The defensive game just wasn't good enough. You look at them defensively last season, 3.5 goals per game allowed. Just gave up way too many goals. There were only two teams in the entire league last year that gave up more goals per game than Pittsburgh, and those two teams were Chicago and San Jose. That was it. So definitely defensive play was an issue for the Pittsburgh Penguins last year, as was the goaltending. The goaltending was just not good enough on a large basis of last season. Up front, when you look at this Pittsburgh Penguins team going into this particular season, obviously you've got the dynamic duo. Well, we'll see if they're still dynamic duo, but the stalwarts down the middle and Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. I know there's some reports going out there that Malkin might be mulling retirement. We'll have to see on that. But like I said, he is up. So this could be, we've already seen in the NHL, by the way, as we're recording this, Anze Kopitar announced that he's retiring after the season for the Los Angeles Kings. So is this maybe a swan song for Evgeny Malkin, who has obviously had a lot of injury setbacks? I'm sure that's playing into his potential decision to maybe hang up the skates after this season. But he is back this season, and it will be Crosby, Malkin down the middle. Thomas Novak's likely going to be the third center. Of course, that's a guy they got from the Nashville Predators. I would think, new coach, of course, Dan Muse is they part ways with Mike Sullivan. They move on from Mike Sullivan, who's now the head coach of the Rangers. I'm willing to give Dan Muse a chance, the new head coach. Obviously, this is a guy that worked under Peter Laviolette as an assistant coach with the New York Rangers. So he's got that assistance of at least being behind an NHL bench. It's just going to be the question of, taking that step to the head coaching role and dealing with a team that's kind of in a rebuild at this point in time. That being said, they went in the right category of coach to hire. You don't want to hire an established guy and bring an established, veteran coach in for a rebuilding situation. I like that they went the route of a younger guy, give him a chance to maybe try to build something and develop players here with this Pittsburgh Penguins team, and certainly Dan Muse will be tasked at doing that. You would think it's going to be a Raquel, Crosby, Rust top line. We know there was chemistry there with them, especially Crosby and Rust, together the last couple of years. It's going to be interesting what you get with the second, the third, and the fourth line. One of the issues for Pittsburgh is that depth scoring hasn't been what it was in their heyday when they were contending for Stanley Cups and winning Stanley Cups. And when you look at this forward group, they're going to need a big jump from Ville Koivunen, a kid they like. Can he be a consistent offensive force? Anthony Mantha comes and goes. He shows little glimmers and flashes of that offensive flair that we knew he saw early in his career, especially with Detroit, but it's just never been really consistent, for him. Danton Heinen, someone that can give you a little bit from the bottom six. Philip Tomasino, it's another player that's been able to chip in some offense, but when you're talking about the options being so thin, in the bottom six, you're going to need all these guys to pull their weight. And, you wonder in the fourth line with Blake Lizotte, Justin Brazeau, Connor Dewar, are you going to get a lot of offense from those guys? I'm not so sure about that. And it really doesn't help going into this season that it looks like there's been an injury setback to Rutger McGroarty. This is certainly a player that Pittsburgh's expecting to be a regular in the lineup, potentially in the top six. And here he is going into training camp now on the injured list. And that's certainly something that is not what you want to see if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, when you're going to be certainly pressed to get that depth scoring heading into this season. And then there's all kinds of big-time questions on the blue line. When you look at it, Erik Karlsson, we know it's sometimes with him, it's most of the time, but all offense, no defense, struggles at times in his own end. Chris Letang, unbelievable that he's still going after, the cardiac issues and so the heart issues and everything he's had to deal with. Now, for that reason, he's a great guy, obviously. He's tremendous as far as a person. I don't want to be harsh, but, we obviously have seen many defensive issues with him the last couple of years increase throughout the latter part of his career. He's still got the skating. He can still be an effective power play guy for you. Certainly his defensive play in his own end has kind of declined a little bit, and then it's, Connor Clifton, who's brought in from Buffalo, Ryan Shea, you got Matt Dumba, who was acquired in a trade with the Dallas Stars in the offseason. What are you going to get out of him? I know Alex and I have said for years about Dumba. It's, sometimes disappointing returns on his play and or injury that always bite him. And that'll be interesting to see if Pittsburgh can get what they're hoping for out of him. There's a chance that Ryan Graves, who, look, he had a horrific year last year, that he doesn't even crack the sixth defenseman. I mean, he's probably going to battle for his spot in training camp from the likes of things. And then you've got, a bunch of unknowns, right? Harrison Brunecke, Parker Wotherspoon, Alexander Alexiev. I mean, Caleb Jones. I mean, who's going to win some of these depth defenseman spots? And even if, regardless of who wins them, are they going to be good and fill those minutes that to a decent quality? To a decent level of quality? That's going to be the big question. And then in net for the Pittsburgh Penguins, he's been on the in and outs with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Tristan Jarry, he's had some unbelievable, tremendous runs and some just awful runs where he can't stop a beach ball. So there's been a little bit of everything with Tristan Jarry, but still the best guy you got, at least as of now. And we'll see if he can put together kind of a bounce back season for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Like I said, last year, the numbers, 892 save percentage, 3.12 goals against average, not exactly what they need. It's got to be better than that. What I do like is the new backup goalie for the Pittsburgh Penguins, guy that's obviously just fresh off a Calder Cup championship where he was not good. He was great for the Abbotsford Canucks in winning that Calder Cup. Arturs Shelovs, that's right. She loves you, yeah. Arturs Shelov is now a Pittsburgh Penguin, and that is definitely one of the moves that I do like that they made. And look, this is a guy that if Jarry stumbles and falters, there'll be no hesitation, I think, or lack of confidence in going and turning to Arturs Shelovs if Tristan Jarry does not play better and more consistent in between the pipes this season for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then, of course, you've got Yoel Blomqvist as your third option. The results were meandering, to say the least, for him last year when we saw him get in net. It will be cool to see Marc-Andre Fleury, though, suit up for that one game. That's a nice little thing the Pittsburgh Penguins are doing there with the now retired Marc-Andre Fleury. It's pretty cool to see that. But when you look at this Pittsburgh Penguins team, gosh, there's all kinds of questions and worries I have about what are they going to get from the bottom six offensively. I think there's a dearth of options there. That's a bother to me. The defense core is just a complete and utter, throw a blanket over all of them. What are you going to get? That's the big question. And as much as we like the two veterans, Karlsson and Letang, there's sometimes some defensive liabilities there with both of those guys. So it's just going to be, like I said, a very worrisome blue line. The depth is a concern for me. And then in net, Jarry's going to have a bounce back year. I do like them having a reliable 1B option now in Shelovs, who has played meaningful games at the NHL level. Remember when he stepped in the Vancouver series a couple of years ago in the playoffs, that playoff run, he had to play a handful of games, and he played, made a pretty decent account for himself in those playoff games, considering that was his first taste of Stanley Cup playoff hockey. So I like the addition of Shelovs for sure. But again, Kyle Dubas has been in this freaking rut the last couple of years, trying to decide, do I completely blow it up, or do I still try to appease to Sidney Crosby and Malkin and Letang and these veterans and try to at least make it look like we're trying to push for the playoffs and, make something out of the season. And I think that stammering and stuttering back and forth has kind of delayed the rebuilding process and kind of put Pittsburgh maybe further behind the 8 ball. That's definitely something that concerns me. The one last point I will make on Pittsburgh before I hand it off to Alex and Matt is, how the fuck was the power play so bad last year? Like, that's the big mystery with the Pittsburgh Penguins, is how the hell, like, I know you've got certainly depth concerns, but you've certainly got enough quality players in your top 6 and blue liners, when you talk about Letang and Carlson as quarterbacks of a power play. This certainly should have a better power play than they obviously had. And it's not just last year. It's really the year before as well. Like, there have been real concerns about the power play for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Certainly 2 years ago it was awful. Last year was better, but there were still times that it was just, struggling. And there were times that it was hard to keep the puck in the offensive zone. So like I said, it's been probably the big question. Now, if the Pittsburgh power play looks great last year, maybe we blame Sullivan for that. Who knows? Because Mike Sullivan's on. But nevertheless, it's just been fascinating that Pittsburgh has not had a better power play the last couple seasons than they've had. And we'll see what they can do with the man advantage this year, because it's been a bit mind-boggling about how much struggles they've had with the man advantage these last couple of seasons. Alex, your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Yeah, this is, eventually has to be the start of what's going to be a very long rebuild in the Steel City. And when you look at just the overall kind of just overlay of the franchise over the next 4 years, the only guy who signed to a contract into 28-29 is Ryan Graves, who you mentioned might be fighting for a roster spot this year. That's not a good sign for your franchise overall. And when you're talking about, your number one prospect already having injury issues, and he's going to be ready to come up at some point. So you don't have much in the cupboard. We've been talking about this for the Penguins for quite some time, where they still have to really try and rebuild and retool the prospect pool. Joel Blomqvist did not look good in the starts that he got, with the big club. So now they went and got Shelovs, which I think is a great grab. I wouldn't shock me one bit if he ends this season or spends the majority of the season as the number one guy, because we've seen inconsistency from Tristan Jarry every year. We can count on Jarry to give us a stretch where he's going to win 4 out of 5 starts, 5 out of 6 starts, and then he'll fall off the table and lose 5 in a row. Like, we just know that's going to happen because it's happened every single year of his career with this organization. So it just seems to be a mess. And now you're hearing more rumblings of, could Crosby be moved? You're hearing the rumblings now of, will Malkin hang it up after this year? And you got all the free cap space in the world moving forward. It's time to hit the red button if you're Kyle Dubas. And the fans have to accept it. It's not, I don't even think it's the players at this point hanging on so much as it is the fan base. And bless Sidney Crosby, right? Like, he's doing everything he can, night in, night out, to win games, to get this organization back to where he knows where he's been, to the top of the mountain. And he also wants to deliver for the fans. You can't ask anything more of number 87, what he's done.
Loyal to a fault. Yep.
To the second half of his career, we can kind of go back and forth about how, he used to bitch the refs and call them crybaby Crosby and all that. But what he's done in the second half of his career has truly solidified his legacy as a bona fide Hall of Fame. I truly believe that. The last 2 cups, so from 16 on, in this last decade, he's just been absolutely tremendous. And like I said, it's loyalty to a fault. At some point, worry about yourself. You have enough talent as Sidney Crosby right now to go on a top contending team and possibly win one more championship. It's not going to happen in Pittsburgh. It's just not. The run happened. What's the whole thing? It says, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. That's the way Penguins fans have to kind of take it and run with it. And it's probably going to be another 10 years before we're on this season preview show talking about, the Penguins are going to the playoffs and making a deep run in the East. But the rebuild's got to start now. You got to start moving some pieces. You can't move too many pieces, because I'm looking at, for example, talk about Erik Karlsson. You can't really move him because you need him as an anchor to stay away from the cap floor. You need his $10 million with this lineup, especially if top guys start getting hurt. You have to worry about being cap compliant on a nightly basis in the reverse fashion. So it's just such a bad situation. But you got to start cleaning things up now. Build for the future. I'm looking at a 7-1 shot over at DraftKings on Pittsburgh having the worst record. I think I might take a little dab on that. There's a couple teams I like in that market. Pittsburgh definitely be one of them. I think 7-1 is much better than looking at plus 200 or plus 250 with the Hawks and Sharks respectively.
The one now, futures wise, I didn't do anything with Pittsburgh. I lean under their 74.5 point total because they got 80 last year. They got to be 6 points worse at least to go under 74.5 points. I could only bet the under. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Don't think they're going to have a very good season, but I do think the odds makers did a decent job adjusting that number down. But like I said, I would lean under 74.5. I'm going to bank on Sidney Crosby this year, though, to really, really carry this team offensively. I went back and looked. I wanted to see a couple of things. Did he stay healthy? And was the production consistent? I don't know if you can do much better than 3 straight seasons of 90-plus points and playing almost every game. Like, he avoided injury. Like, you talk about the durability for a guy now in his late 30s. Like, he's 38 entering this season, upcoming. The fact that he's been able to play 80-plus games the last 3 years, 90-plus points 3 straight seasons, I'm taking it. I think it's a great price. I know he's another year older. Is this the year the injuries strike? Maybe. But I'm willing to think that he can avoid those major injuries. He has done an immaculate job in the offseason with his training regimen. We see it all every year with the way how hard he works. He's working his tail off just as much this offseason as he did, say, 10 years ago to make sure he's in the perfect fitness and health and stamina.
He's more durable.
Injuries. Yeah.
He's more durable. We questioned Sidney Crosby. I know for a fact, I've said oftentimes during the regular season on this program in previous years where, Penguins don't really have much to worry about because Crosby's out of the lineup. Crosby's always out of the lineup at some point. There was always extended stretches whether it was concussions or other issues where he was out of the lineup during a season. And thankfully Pittsburgh was able to navigate without him during those times. But for the fact for him to become more durable in his older age, like I said, it's just a testament to how hard he works.
And with that in mind, that I expect him to stay healthy, and he's gotten to 90-plus points in 3 straight seasons, I am on Sidney Crosby 90-plus points at FanDuel, plus 210 is the price with that. I think it's a good price. I think he can hit, and he's going to have to carry the load offensively. Like, who is going to have to, because this bottom 6 scares me. Like, who can I count on in the 3rd and the 4th line consistently to produce for this Penguins team? I'm not so sure. Sidney Crosby's going to have to carry the load. He's got the chemistry with Rust, and probably Raquel will be on his left side. If he plays the 80-plus games and almost 82 like he's done the last 3 years, he's got a great chance, in my opinion, to hit 90 points again. So I like that at plus 210.
And what's great about that is – go ahead, Matt.
Sorry. Yeah, I think ironic thing with Crosby is he's the biggest obstacle in the way of a Penguins rebuild because Kyle Dubas has said this many times. He's just too good for us to truly bottom out. He hasn't said it in that many words or in those exact words, but we know what he's getting at. You can't really tank when you've got Sid playing at this level. And who knows, he could be a Tom Brady-like figure in the NHL. He could play until he's 45. I fully believe that and still be somewhere around a point per game. But I think my biggest issue, Ian, with the 90 points, it's just I feel like guys are going to get moved this year. I feel like we're going to see, whether it be Carlson, whether it be Raquel, maybe even a Brian Rust by the trade deadline. I just think this is the year where Dubas makes one significant veteran go away, and then you lose your support. If you're Sid, your assists start to tail off. And he's not a prolific goal scorer at this point of his career either. He's still solid, but that's never been his elite strength, but he's had seasons of 40.
Oh, he's more playmaker than goal scorer right now, for sure.
Yeah, at this point, and that's just the reality of aging, right? That's what happens to superstars. The assists start to go up a little bit more, and maybe the goals drop off. So that's what I'd be worried about if you're talking about over 90 points, somewhere in that range. I'm just not sure he has the backing this year in the end, by the time we get to the end of the season.
Well, and see, all right, the counterpoint to that, and obviously the reason why I like the over 90 is because of the fact that, there could be movement. We could see where Crosby has to be the guy to do everything. So his goal, I think that's what I'm saying, his goal increase, I think, could be at where it was last year, if not go up. because he's going to have to be the guy to score the goals. So looking at that aspect, and then also if there's so many moves, if he decides to say, hey, you know what, maybe I should move on myself, and he's already got 50, 60 points when he gets moved, who wouldn't shock me one bit to see him go somewhere right after the deadline and just become an immediate impact and get those last 30 points. I could easily see that happening too. So I think there's a couple of different ways where it shakes out where Crosby ends up getting to that number.
Yeah.
I don't know if I see Crosby moving in season. I think that might be more of a deliberate off-season type move. It would have to be pretty toxic and bad in Pittsburgh, I think, for him to ask out midway through. I still think we're at least.
But what if they offer? If you get an offer? This is the Godfather, an offer you can't refuse, and maybe
but Sid's going to have to want to go though.
Right. But sure. But I'm saying, I'm saying, if those stars align, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. We could say 3 years ago this is out of the realm of possibility. It's not out. It's in the realm of possibility now that a deal could be put together where Sidney Crosby is moved out of Pittsburgh. That makes more sense now than it ever has in the entire time of Sidney Crosby playing in Pittsburgh.
Can we equate the rumors heating up with him being traded to him maybe opening the door to have more of a desire to be moved? Is that correlated at all?
Yeah,
because all I've heard the last several months is, rumors heating up. Crosby will eventually agree to a trade. Is it true that maybe he's more of an open mind to it happening now? Who knows? But all I know is publicly,
I think his agent is trying to
go anywhere. Yep.
Yeah, I think his agent Pat Brisson's trying to maybe soften things a little bit for his client. That's my feeling on why he had those statements to Pierre LeBrun the other week. It just felt like maybe they're testing the waters and just trying to float a trial balloon there. But to your point, Alex, earlier about Penguins fans, I think most diehard Penguins fans that I talk to have been ready for the rebuild for a while. It's just a matter of how they go about it, right? And if you do make big moves, what do you get in return? I know that a lot of Pens fans were ready to move on from Malkin 3 years ago. Same deal with Chris Letang, but Ron Hextall felt pressure from ownership to re-sign both because that was right after Fenway took over. Now they're probably on their way out, so it just shows you the futility of all this stuff sometimes. But I do feel like Penguins fans have been worn out by the cycle of sticking to the past, the nostalgia tour, and all that. But yeah, when it comes to Crosby, it's a whole different level of sensitivity too. So I think there's a lot of Pens fans who aren't bought into Sid moving on. I think most Pens fans have conceded for a while now that this is not going to happen with this current group. But
that's the thing; you can't have one without the other. And as a fan base, you have to come to that realization. As a Hawks fan who was completely devastated to see Patrick Kane get moved to the New York Rangers, I knew it had to happen. There's certain things and certain points with a franchise and with franchise players where it has to happen. They have to move on. And I really don't see where at some point, with the 2 years that's left on Sid's deal, try and get something of a value, because you're not going to grab the kind of picks and players on your own in free agency on a given year that you would trading Sidney Crosby either this year or next year, especially if he's playing at the high level that we're talking about as a veteran.
Yeah, if he's on 90 points again at the deadline,
right? So
the chance if they know
we're not talking about a downtrodden, injury-riddled Sidney Crosby that you can't move and okay, fine, play out the nostalgia for the fans. This is a guy who's still playing at a very high level that is worth something as far as the trade goes. So to say that you can't get something back, that you can't get the pieces you need back to trade him, is borderline crazy in my opinion, because you can't tell me that Sidney Crosby is not a perfect fit for any team that's about to go into the playoffs, because he is. So,
sure. Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm only disputing the fact that you have to trade Crosby. You can strip it around him. I mean, the Kings rebuilt with Doughty and Kopitar still. I'm actually impressed by how they've been able to stay competitive. They've been more competitive than the Penguins have, that's for sure.
Crosby situation, Matt, is if they trade him, that you're speeding up the rebuild by 2, 3, 4 years, probably. But if you don't trade him, it's just going to be a slower process. It's going to be a slower burn to really build this thing back up. That'll be
with the possibility of ownership. changing. We've seen the attendance decline a little bit. You don't want things to get. Oh, hello. Okay.
No,
with attendance, we've seen attendance decline. Okay. We've seen attendance decline the last year with the possibility of an ownership change happening as well. You don't want this to be where it was at the beginning of the turn of the century when Mario had to come in and save the club. You don't want to have those kind of issues. But if you have a 8, 9, 10-year rebuild ahead of you, how are you expecting 15,000, 16,000 fans to come out night in, night out, knowing that you're going to spend the next 5 years at the absolute bottom of the East, if not the league?
You can speak to it, Matt, the attendance issues, because we saw the pictures. We saw the pictures on Twitter during these Penguins home games. It's unbelievable just how many empty seats there were. How much of a concern you being right there is this becoming?
Yeah, they were down to, I think, 92 or 91% capacity after almost 2 decades of 100% capacity sellouts for more than a decade at least. Yeah. Not sure the exact number on that, but they were a shoo-in to sell every seat in the building essentially for a long, long time during the playoff streak. And I think 92 isn't awful, but I think if the fan base feels like this team is directionless, then I could see that drop another 5%, at which point you're among the bottom feeders in the NHL when it comes to that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's all a concern. I go back to the irony of it, right, is that the reason that they stuck with Letang and Malkin in specific was to appease the fans and have them to continue to come out to PPG Paints Arena and buy tickets. But at the same time, that might be pushing the recycle, whatever you want to call it, but whenever you do get back on the upswing, it might be pushing that further down the road, and that could lead to a longer dip. So Kyle Dubas said it first day of training camp. You take a shortcut, it can cut short your long run of contention. It was a pithy little quote, but I enjoyed it. So I think his head's in the right spot. It's just what can he get for these guys? I think he's going to start to make some moves. I'm surprised that this roster is as, quote, good as it is right now, because if you're really trying to position yourself for the future, this roster is actually too good. If there's too many NHL players, there's no real upside to any of these guys, but there aren't a lot of guys that I say, they're not NHL players. Maybe Ryan Graves is the exception. And like you said, Alex, he's signed for 3 or 4 more years. It's just terrible signing. Anyway, and you've got Tristan Jarry. We'll see where that pans out. But for the most part, there's a lot of competence on the roster, but there's nobody that's going to make a difference outside of Crosby, outside of Raquel and Rust. Maybe Malkin. We'll see if he's got one push left.
They do have one hell of a top line if they all stay healthy. I will say that.
Right, but that can only get you so far. It gets you, a few more points, and it gets you a few more goals on the year. But in the end, there's just no depth whatsoever. It's all replacement level or maybe slightly above replacement level guys. So they got to continue to build up that prospect.
And now the guy's injured. So that's a terrible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that because he was out delivering tickets and smiling and talking to all the season ticket holders. So I feel like maybe it's not going to be that big of a deal, but it is a downer for sure because he built some momentum late last season. Ville Koivunen did too. Yep. Those guys gave a spark. In goal, actually, might be the most exciting part of the prospect pool are the young guys, the Shilovs, and Sergei Murashov is a big-time prospect that's going to spend most of the year in the AHL, I think. But he's super athletic, could be their star goalie of the future. So behind Jarry, there's some interest there, but for the most part, McGroarty and Koivunen already came up, so we're not going to really see that many new youngsters this year unless trades are made. So that's where I feel like this is going. It's just a question of when does it happen.
Yeah. I'm also going to just kind of bide my time as far as the pipeline of goalies go with the Penguins because we've seen things kind of drop off in recent years. Like I said, Tristan Jarry was, a product of this group. There's been a few guys that have been through this pipeline that we thought were going to be great, not so much. Same thing with Blomqvist.
I thought Blomqvist supposed to be hot stuff, and they're not.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen, and this is probably one of the teams where I'd be watching at the AHL level to see where these probably him and Philip Larson as well too. But like I said, I want to temper expectations with the goalies in Pittsburgh.
Hey, Matt Murray did win 2 cups, and he fell off a cliff, but he did win 2 cups.
Yeah, he's the last guy. He's the last guy to really kind of come through the system and really kind of stick. And then, like I said, injuries derailed him. So.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fair. It's totally fair. Jari is such a weird case, though, because he's been an all-star and he's been an AHL level guy in the same span of, 3 years, and he can go back and forth.
That's true. He was sent down
it's
for a
exhausting to deal with, honestly. I'm pretty disappointed that he's still in Pittsburgh, but I guess I get it because he's the best guy they have available at the moment, unless Shelovs goes on some heater here.
Yeah.
In which case, maybe you can find a taker, but the contract's too rich for the inconsistency that he's put up.
Yeah, there is definitely a real chance Shelovs is playing more games this year than Jari. Because I don't fully trust Jari to be consistent, and I've seen enough of Shelovs to think, it may not be asking a lot for him to outperform Jari in the crease for this Pittsburgh Penguins team. So I wouldn't be surprised by that either. Just one last thing on Dan Muse before we wrap it up. Sounds like he might try to implement more of a defensive style with this team, because he's coached as an assistant with Nashville and the Rangers in the past. He's obviously coached the U.S. Men's National Development Program. A couple of those under-18 World Junior teams he's coached for Team USA. So that's a good thing too. He's been on the ground floor helping develop young players. That's got to be a positive here for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But most of his time as an assistant, he was coaching the defense and coaching penalty kill. So it makes me kind of think that, is he going to try to make this a 2-1, 3-1 type of team? Especially knowing that after Sid and Brian Rust and Raquel, that top line, maybe the options as far as offense is concerned are very, very slim. Maybe we're going to try to win some tighter, be more conservative, really, really focus on, keeping the puck out of the net first and foremost and try to win lower scoring hockey, knowing we don't have that same offensive firepower we've had in the past. Matt, what's your thought about that and the kind of coaching style Muse will try to implement here?
Right. He's kind of a blank slate, but as you indicated, he's got some experience on the defensive side of things mostly, and he's got some experience in the NHL as an assistant. Early reports out of training camp is that he's spending a lot of time one-on-one with guys, which ties into the whole developmental focus that we believe he's going to bring to the Penguins. More young players are going to be coming up. It's going to require more of that specific touch with each guy to get the most out of them. So, yeah, that part's encouraging, and of course, we'll find out on the returns here. The Penguins haven't had to develop very many young guys in a long time. So, outside of a Jake Gensel and Brian Rust, and that's like 7 or 8 years ago at this point when they were still considered young. So it has been a while since they had that switch. My one criticism of Mike Sullivan specifically over the past couple of years is that the team had no real feel for situational hockey. They're up a goal and they're still trying to make a play at the blue line. Do something dumb. I mean, Erik Karlsson does that a lot, but that's just him. I meant the whole team, though. It hasn't felt like they've had that mentality where, okay, at this point in the game, we need to take chances. This point in the game, we need to button it up a little bit. It just felt like they were playing dumb hockey, for lack of a better term, over the latter course of latter half, maybe even of his career. In some big moments, they would come up short. They'd come up small. So I'm hearing also about Dan Muse focusing more on those types of spots, about allowing guys to try to use their hockey IQ in a way that benefits the team in these high leverage situations. So I'm not sure it necessarily means play a more conservative style all the way across the board, but I think it does mean using your head a little bit more and maybe adding a little more thought to a system in Mike Sullivan he wanted it to be played fast and instinctual. Maybe they take a half step back from that this year just to tap on the brakes because of all the new guys that are going to be coming in, presumably in the near future. So I could see that sort of an approach. And maybe in the NHL these days, that's enough to be called a defensive coach, because most teams want to attack. Essentially, everyone does. They talk about it, but do you actually do it in practice? I suppose that's something that will be determined. But I am looking forward to seeing if they can improve upon some of that situational stuff that really hurt them in recent years.
I asked that because, and the reason I asked that question is because Alex and I, we bet a lot of totals. Every year we come into the Penguins season and say, we got to bet overs with this team, over.
Yes,
with
that's
this
smart.
team every single year. And this year I'm pumping the brakes, at least initially, on that, because of the fact that I just get that feeling with them being like third last in the NHL in goals allowed per game last year, that Dan Muse is going to want this team competing 200 feet, both ends of the ice, as much as possible. And so maybe the scoring, I think the scoring will decline for Pittsburgh this year just because of the lack of depth of offensively they have. But will the defensive numbers improve this year? And the chance to improve too, because you got Shelovs there. as well as a very, very reliable 1B option. So that's why normally I'm thinking let's bet all kinds of overs over the total in Pittsburgh Penguins games, and I'm not quite as bullish about it coming into this season with that thought process. But we'll see how it plays out. Great stuff with Alex B. Smith and Matt Gajka here talking Pittsburgh Penguins for the upcoming season. Before we wrap it up, let's hear from our brand new smoke sponsor of the Ice Guys Show, our good friends at Royal Cannabis.
Royal Cannabis, where the kings and queens shop.
Check it out, 20% off, promo code Ice Guys, royalcannabisshop.com. That is your look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. We thank Matt Gajka for joining us on this preview episode. For Alex B. Smith and Matt Gajka, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been your Pittsburgh Penguins season preview video as 32 teams in 32 days rolls along, courtesy of the Ice Guys.